At the outset, a privileged few had full rights, while many others were forced to find their own pathways to equality. Then a wave of women stood their ground. Faced with many dead ends, they drove relentlessly along narrow roads and around uncharted bends, until at long last one group's great accomplishment led them straight away to better but still uneven and unequal days. A second wave made progress, but faced many obstacles and came up short of its goal. It's been a man's world for a long time, but maybe someday we'll be able to say that equally so, it's a woman's world. A show which looks at any and all topics under the sun from a woman's point of view, featuring Ali Naithani. We are very pleased to have two published authors as our co-hosts today. Bonnie Peace Watkins is past president of the Minnesota Women's Consortium and current associate for Women's United Nations Report Network. Susan Strauss is a harassment and bullying consultant, investigator, trainer, researcher, and expert.
Hello, and welcome to It's a Woman's World. I'm Bonnie Watkins, filling in today for regular host Ali, who could not be here today. I'm delighted to welcome co-host Susan Strauss.
Hi, Bonnie. Good to be here.
Thank you. And special guest today, Nyango Melissa Nambangi, who is the executive director of the Minnesota African Women's Association.
MAWA, yes.
MAWA. So, Melissa, tell us, I know you have a personal story about how you came to Minnesota. Should we start there?
Okay. I actually was a journalist back home in Cameroon, West Africa. Now, as a journalist, I became also the news anchor for the English news, the primetime English news. And I came out here as a Hubert Humphrey Fellow. And I was sent to Minnesota, actually, which I didn't even know about. But I was sent because of my interest in women's advancement and the extra work I did as a journalist on women's issues. And after my Hubert Humphrey here in Minnesota, I went on to graduate school at the U of M, School of Journalism. And while there, I also taught at the Women's Studies Department. And in doing that teaching, I got to realize a lot about the similarities in women's issues and the similarities across cultures also. So when I was done with that, not wanting to continue with journalism here because it was different from what I used to practice back home, I got involved in working with battered women. And as an advocate at the Battered Women's Shelter, I started noticing the difference again in African women's issues when they came to the shelter. And that's how come from there we got to create MAWA.
Could you say a little bit more, Melissa, on what you saw, some of those distinctions between African women's victimization and American women or white women's victimization?
I think the biggest thing I saw was the reluctance to ask for help. Because of the cultural restraints, you don't take your problems at home to total strangers.
Okay.
And so it was very difficult for the women. Whenever they came to the shelter, we realized that they were at their last breath. They were now the legendary between a rock and a hard place. They just had to get help. And then when they got there, the options that were offered them were things American women would consider without hesitation, but the African women could not, because for some of them it was more a matter of, could you please speak to my husband so he doesn't do this anymore? Oh. And the advocates cannot do that. And then the solution of, go for a divorce or throw him out of the house, that was not sitting well with the women, because that's not what their culture tells them is the solution to a problem in marriage. So it was very difficult for them. And then other things that affected them were issues like, you can immediately go on welfare and start getting help for you and your children. Well, she does need the help, but her visa status might make that a problem. She might have one of those visas that do not permit that you become a burden to the American public. So if the person serving them does not know that, you will be creating a new problem for the woman by offering her that solution. And she herself might not know. that she cannot do that. So those were some
I have to interrupt one second to just acknowledge for our viewers that the Congress has finally passed the Violence Against Women Act. And I know that some of the provisions that affect immigrant and refugee women in particular are much better than they were when you first started MAWA.
Right.
Not fixed by any means.
Not fixed.
But some of those visa issues have changed,
Well,
right?
that would work for a woman who wants to leave the marriage, but if she doesn't want to, she cannot go getting VAWA, because you must talk about the abuse if you are going for VAWA.
Oh, okay.
So, and we did use VAWA a lot to help many of the women who really knew that this was not working anymore. And because abusers, not only African but other immigrants, also use the same tactic of withholding the woman's documentation. A lot of them did not know if they were legally here, did not know if they had green cards, did not know that kind of information. And when we took them and used VAWA to help them get their residency, the lawyer will go, oh, she's had a green card for 3 years now. She has no idea.
The husband kept it from her.
Yes, so all those things came into play, and that's how, and it was with the women making that request that we come up with a nonprofit that serves African women and is run by African women. That's how we eventually got to the point where we started MAWA.
And so when you think of African women and the battering, what percentage of African women are in this abusive relationship?
You know, it's so difficult to get a percentage because there are various forms of abuse. A lot of people will tell you, I'm not abused because nobody hits me.
Yeah.
But then there's the financial abuse, there's the verbal abuse, there's so many women who do not even have, like I said, access to their green card because the husband, who is not seemingly abusing in any other way, decides not to give you that green card just to control.
Just more power and
more
control.
More power and control.
Yeah.
And isn't it fair to say, just as with,
With
white
many other-
born in the USA
yeah.
women, that this is a huge and common problem.
It is a
but
common.
often hidden.
Yes,
That you
yes,
just don't
right.
know what's happening in the house
You
right
don't.
next door to you a
No.
lot of times.
Very
You
true.
don't.
And because of society, at least most of our African communities tend to make a mockery of the person who is being abused.
Oh.
So very few people want to go around saying, oh yeah, I'm an abused woman.
So
You know?
women, do women, African women, support their African sisters who are being abused?
But your friends would support you, your family would support you. Somebody else might just laugh at you or something. So yeah, there is the support is mainly on personal levels, whereas we do need a real overhaul to,
Kind of
to address the
structural.
issue.
Yeah.
So you created MAWA and hired staff and got a board of directors and all that good stuff, right?
Yeah.
I know you dealt with issues in addition to violence. Do you want to talk more about your other programs or
Yeah.
other things
Oh,
MAWA
yeah,
does?
for
Or your
sure.
mission? Or
Yes. Well, our mission is to promote the health and well-being of African women and their families in Minnesota. And we realized that we needed to work with women from every part of Africa because in spite of the differences we have, we share the same cultural values. So we may have differences in religion and how we observe our religion, how we practice it, but the values of large family, of family being so important, of marriage being so important, all those values are values that we all share. So we decided that we would need to serve all African women. We cannot make it by country of origin or something like that. But then, as we started off with the interest in domestic violence, the women started asking us to work with their daughters, saying their daughters were having a tough time getting, getting into the American community, understanding the lifestyle and all that, and making bad choices because they didn't have the role models and the people to tell them. And unfortunately for a lot of the parents, they also are new to the society, so they don't really know some of the things that they should be able to teach their daughters. And again, because of the need to support large families and being underemployed, they had to at least do 2 or 3 jobs just to be able to support your family. So as a result, a lot of parents are not home when these kids are out of school. And the kids are, and then it's always easier to get into enjoying your rights and forgetting about your responsibilities. So there was a lot of that, a lot of that going on. And the parents started asking if we could help. And at the same time, as soon as we showed an interest in working with girls, we started getting calls from schools as well.
I was going to ask you
Who
if
had
you've partnered with
difficulty,
schools.
yes, who had difficulties with getting the African kids to understand some of the rules. For instance, one school called where they had just suspended a girl for 3 days, and the very next day she was back on the bus coming to school, and it was like, what part of suspension don't you get? You know, we had an apartment building manager call, and oh my God, can you help? My girls are out, African girls are out on the street, and this is what they are doing. And so each of these people who kept calling for help, we asked them, once we get funding for our girls program, would you let us have a group at your site? And they said, yeah. So those were the very first schools we were at. With the girls, we call it the African Girls Initiative for Leadership and Empowerment.
Oh, wonderful
Which is
name.
Agile.
I love
Agile.
Great
I
acronym.
Yes,
love
we
the
wanted
name.
the acronym so they always think of themselves as agile people.
Good.
And while our first focus was on social networking, because a lot of them were really isolated, one thing people do not realize is that when we come from Africa, we are not Africans. We are our individual countries.
Yes.
I came out here as a Cameroonian. The next person came as a Nigerian, a Liberian, a Somali person. It's here that we have to start answering to African. So it's a long process to get to the point where you recognize that I am an African before being a Cameroonian. And therefore, my interest should be in African issues and not only my country. So it is difficult for the girls also to make that connection.
Yes.
And by bringing them together, we eventually got them to the point where
Excellent.
they are seeing each other as being part of themselves. And then in noticing the kinds of issues that they were facing and the difficulties and the challenges, we slowly moved from just social networking to college attendance, promoting college attendance, promoting financial literacy education, and doing teen pregnancy prevention.
Great.
Because we were noticing all of these things going wrong.
What year did
I'm
you
sorry,
begin?
we're almost out of time, so I just say 2 words about, I know you have an employment program for adult
Yes.
women too.
Yes, we have an employment program for the adult women, mainly teaching them how to find jobs and helping them with finding the jobs and understanding how to keep their jobs and work in the American workplace, because it's very different from back home. You have people who say, well, but I couldn't make it to the interview, and you know, and it's like, if you couldn't make it, you had to call before
Right,
time.
there's rules.
Yeah, you don't do, I'll call and explain later. That worked back home. It doesn't work here.
Right. Listen, I'm
there's
so
a lot
sorry
of
we're out of
things.
time. You have to come back.
I will.
Yes.
And we will, I know, get your website and put that up on the screen for our viewers to be able to
Okay.
find out more about MAWA.
Yes,
Thank
and
you
I would
so
love
much.
to
Thank
tell
you,
them
Melissa.
about African harmony, and we can come sing anywhere.
Oh,
Sing.
that would
She's
be
a singer,
wonderful.
too.
Yes, that would be
Great.
wonderful.
Well,
Yes,
thank
well,
you so much.
Thank you.
It was
It's very
fun.
interesting.
It's really wonderful learning things in this show. We'll be back very shortly. Our next guest is Nadia Giordana, who is a lifestyle strategist.
Welcome back to It's a Woman's World, and now we have a great guest, Nadia Giordano. And Nadia is a life strategist, and she has also accomplished a weight loss of about 88 pounds, and she's going to talk to us about that. Welcome, Nadia. We're glad you're here.
Hi, I'm pleased to be here.
Now, what exactly is a life strategist?
I guess more what I call myself is a lifestyle strategist.
Okay.
And that's because I'm more of a mentor and a motivator. I'm not a coach in the sense where I take on clients day to day in that sense.
Well, you've gone through dramatic change in your life. What has been what was your catalyst, and what do you owe your success to that you can pass on to the women that are watching today?
Well, I'll tell you the story. It was 2006, and I was working in a corporate job that I intended to stay with until I retired. When the layoff came, I was blindsided. I was devastated. I was paralyzed. I didn't know what to do. As a matter of fact, I didn't do anything for a full year after that. I didn't go out and look for other work. I didn't feel like I was hireable at that point in time, and that I'll get into that in a second. But I was seriously overweight. That's part of the reason I didn't feel like I could go out and look for work, but I didn't even try. Until the moment when I had what you'd call the proverbial aha moment. And I thought to myself, my life isn't even close to being over, and neither is anyone else's when we think about it. So I decided to address the one area of my life in need of the greatest renovation, and that was my weight. What I did was take stock of where I was, how I had gotten there, or how I had slipped off track might be more accurate, where I really wanted to be, and how I was going to get there. I started designing a plan. I put it down on paper. I did a little research on the internet with regard to nutrition and things, but really, I knew what I'd been doing wrong. I knew I was overeating. I knew I was making wrong choices. I just had to organize the plan and implement it in my life. So I did that.
Not an easy task.
Not an easy task. I make it sound easy sometimes, but it wasn't an easy task. And for the first 6 months, which made it even less easy, I had a leg injury, so I wasn't able to do any weight-bearing exercise.
Wow.
So I lost the first 60 pounds without benefit of exercise.
Oh my gosh.
But at that point, I added exercise to my routine. I knew I needed it, and I knew it was important, and went on to lose a full 88 pounds. It took about 14 months. I kept a lot of notes, and I also kept a food journal during that time. My intent was to maybe write a couple of articles, start a blog about my weight loss journey. But in the end, I realized I had enough information for a book. And that's how Thinking Skinny was originally born.
And I love the title, don't
It
you?
is great. And I know we're going to see the picture of you before and after on the cover of that book. But I love it. You make the point that there was more to it than just losing weight. So what, you wrote the book and then
There
what
really
came
was,
next?
out of the realization that there's so much more to this. It wasn't about the weight loss when you get right down to it. It was about doing what I had intended to do for years. It was about getting healthy. It was about a lot of different things. And I wrote the second book, Reinventing New Chapters in Your Life at Any Age, 7 Steps to Making It Happen, because of that. It was designed to inspire other women in my age group that no matter what it is, whether it's your health or whether it's a project or whether it's something fun you wanted to do, whether it's starting a business, many of us have shelved those things throughout the course of our lives. And someday is here. It's time for us to get out there and do those things.
And so what are the 7 steps that you've talked about in your book that you think were successful in your weight loss?
Exactly. And I wrote those down too, and they became the second book. The first one we touched on when we talked about Thinking Skinny, reshaping a healthier body and attitude. And that can be a lot of different things for women too, whether that's just improving your nutrition, getting out and walking once in a while, reducing stress, making allowances and doing some things to keep your mental health in a good place. And the second one, which I think is very important, realigning relationships that are out of sync in your life. It's difficult, if not impossible, to start a new chapter in your life if there's stress or active conflict going on around you. So it's very important to resolve those things.
I think realign is a nice word, though, too, because it
Yes.
doesn't necessarily mean you ditch all your old friends. You just realign them.
Good point.
Exactly.
Good point.
Yeah, and that is right. Realigning your thought patterns to realigning your thought patterns to understand and to leave open to the possibilities that are still out there for this new chapter in your life. For me, and for almost anybody, you're going to bring in at that point, it's a good spot for prayer, for visualization, for coaching, for books, for going to classes, mentoring. I used prayer and visualization a lot in my weight loss journey. For someone else, they might use something different. The fourth one, rediscovering the magic in your life. That's a fun one because I remember, and many of you do too, I remember a point, I was a child, I looked up into the sky and I thought to myself, I have my whole life ahead of me. What a wondrous and exciting feeling that is. And what I want people to know is no matter where we are on that timeline, we still do. We just have to embrace it and make use of it. Removing lingering regrets. That's number 5. And that also is important.
It's a tough one.
That's a tough one. And we all have regrets. None of us gets a do-over in this life. There's so many things that we'd like to live over if we could, and we can't, and we carry those regrets. If we let them weigh us down, we're never going to be able to move forward.
How were you able to do that? I mean, everything you're talking about, and I know we haven't even hit all the steps yet, some of these are really major efforts. And was the prayer and the visualization enough to get you through this?
You know, for this one, I didn't use those things. One of the things I used was to simply voice that regret, cry about something if it's a big one. I have one that always makes people smile. I say, rationalize. But I mean that in a very positive ways. There are ways of rationalizing things where you might even be able to find something positive out of something very negative. And then bring to mind for yourself some really good things that you've done in your life and balance that out. Those are 3 things that I tell people to do, to put those into a proper perspective, because it is a tough one.
Yeah, that would be.
And number 6, rewriting your new life chapter. That's goal setting, pure and simple. I have a 3-tiered approach to goal setting that can be applied to almost any situation. And you use that to map out and draw out this new life chapter and then implement it. And of course, number 7, revealing your purpose, revealing your new life project, whether that's a new business, whether that's a new endeavor that you're going to do, whether it's a sport, it doesn't matter what it is. Write an article about it, have a Facebook page, tell your friends. And if it's a personal transformation like mine was, reintroduce yourself to your family and friends.
Well, now, as a life experience strategist, who comes to see you? Can you say something about that? Who do you work with?
I don't take on clients one-on-one. What I do, I get my message out through my books, through my videos, through doing workshops, speaking to women's groups.
Gotcha.
That's where I am.
And I know that you've got Woman Vision TV. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit about that.
That's a fun one. That's a fun one. But strangely, that came out of another big stumbling block in my life. I've had a lifelong, deep-seated fear of public speaking. Here I am on your show.
Yeah, look at you. You're wonderful.
Seems pretty darn smooth.
Don't make me think about it. But I did. I had a lifelong fear of public speaking, and I did a few things to work past that. I started doing some speaking to small groups and in short periods of time, and then for a couple of years I did a blog talk radio show. And that did me a lot of good because I was able to place my focus on my guests rather than on myself. And I've always had a love of the technical aspects and the behind the camera parts of video.
Sounds like me.
I just love that.
You love that, huh?
Yes, I do. And out of that came Woman Vision TV. I decided to put that all together. I built a mini TV studio in the basement of my house. Susan's been there.
Yes, I've
You've
been there,
seen
and it looks very fancy, very nice.
It's really fun, and it didn't take much to put together. And now I have Woman Vision TV, where I interview and talk to some of the exciting and fun women that cross my path when I'm out and about.
And she does a great job.
And how can I see Women Vision TV?
I have, it's on my website, embodyyourvision.com. There are links
Wonderful.
to the show.
Wonderful.
And what else would you want to leave us with that you think would be most important for viewers?
The one thing I'd like to talk about, because it falls right into reinventing new chapters in your life at any age, are my 2 greatest mentors in my whole life. I'm so proud of them. They are my parents.
Oh.
They're in their mid-80s now. But in 1978, at age 50, after raising 4 children to adulthood, they sold their dairy farm in Motley, Minnesota. They packed up all their belongings
Wow.
and loaded up a 1964 Freightliner semi-tractor and trailer with 73,000 pounds of gear and equipment.
Oh my
And
gosh.
said goodbye to family and friends and set out to carve a new life for themselves in Alaska. They built a log cabin on the frozen tundra. Dad did prospecting and hunting and provided for what their meager needs that they had. Mom built a garden, made new friends. She went out and picked berries in bear country, no small feat. And they lived there for 27 years, living off the land and what little income they had.
It sounds like they really modeled your 7 steps, even though you may not have put those 7 steps together at the time.
Yep.
It sounds like they exemplified it.
They really did. I don't know how that happened, and maybe that is how it happened as far as how it influenced me, but yes, they certainly did.
What wonderful role models.
And you are so inspiring. That's you're a wonderful role model.
Yeah,
too.
you really are.
It's fun.
We only have a little bit of time, but is there anything else when you think of the baby boomers coming up, and you're a baby boomer, some other extra little, in the few seconds we have left, a major punch that you would recommend to baby boomers?
I like to tell baby boomers to think about their life as if it were a book and ask themselves what chapters are yet to be written, and don't ever let the opinions of someone else stop you from doing something that you really want to do.
So even at this later stage in our lives, we've still got a lot open to us.
We have the whole rest of our lives ahead of us.
Yeah, that's wonderful thinking. Well, thank you very much, Nadia, for joining us and being interviewed. And Bonnie, thank you as
Great.
well. And thank you for joining It's a Woman's World. And we hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.